I still remember the exact moment my wife's face went pale. She was standing in the middle of our living room, barefoot, wearing the same robe she used to wear after coming home from another man's house. And for the first time in 10 years, she looked scared. Not angry, not confident, not smug, scared. Because I was holding divorce papers in one hand and my phone in the other. And on my phone was a photo of me smiling next to another woman. A woman who didn't treat me like an option. A woman who didn't call my pain insecurity. A woman who didn't use the word freedom as an excuse to destroy me. My wife's voice cracked when she said, "Wait, you're actually leaving me?" And I swear the funniest part was she genuinely didn't believe I ever would. She thought I was her safety net, her backup plan, her emotional ATM, her loyal little husband who would sit at home like a good boy while she lived her best life. But what she didn't know was that while she was busy chasing attention, I was quietly building a life she wasn't invited to anymore. And when she finally realized that, it was already too late. I'm Ryan, 34 years old. And for most of my adult life, I thought I was married to the love of my life. Her name is Melissa. We met when we were both in college. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately pulled attention without trying. Confident smile, sharp humor, the kind of laugh that made you feel like you were part of something special. When she chose me, I felt like I had won the lottery, and for a while it actually felt like we were unstoppable. We dated for 3 years, then got married, then bought a small house, then built a life. At least I thought we did. Because looking back now, I realized something. I built a life. She built an escape plan. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Melissa worked in marketing. I worked in it. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. And in the early years, we had that best friend kind of love. We would cook together, watch movies, take road trips, talk about having kids someday. I genuinely thought we were happy. But around year 4, Melissa started changing. It wasn't sudden, it was subtle. Like someone slowly turning down the warmth in a room so you don't notice until you're freezing. She started dressing up more, posting more selfies, spending more time on her phone. And at first I didn't mind. I thought she was just feeling herself. But then she started coming home later. And when I asked about it, she'd smile and say, "Work stuff." And I believed her because why wouldn't I? I was her husband. And I trusted her. That was my first mistake. One night she came home at 2 a.m. I was sitting on the couch, half asleep, worried out of my mind. When she walked in, she didn't even look guilty. She looked annoyed. Like I was the problem. I stood up and asked her calmly, "Melissa, where were you?" She dropped her purse, kicked off her heels, and said, "I told you, work." I said, "At 2 a.m. She rolled her eyes and said, "God, Ryan, why do you always make everything a big deal?" That sentence hit me hard, because I wasn't yelling. I wasn't accusing. I was just asking. But in that moment, I realized something. Melissa didn't want a husband. She wanted a roommate who paid half the bills and didn't ask questions. A few weeks later, she sat me down at our kitchen table. She had this serious look on her face, like she was about to tell me someone died. I remember my stomach dropping. She reached across the table, held my hand, and said, "Ryan, I love you." I said, "Okay." Then she said, "But I feel like we're stuck." I asked her what she meant, and she took a deep breath and said, "I think we should open our marriage." I didn't even respond right away. I just stared at her because I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She started talking like she had rehearsed it. She said things like, "It's not cheating if we're honest. Monogamy is outdated. I want to experience life. This will make us stronger. If you trust me, you'll understand." Then she said the line I will never forget. "I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to feel trapped." Trapped. Like I was a prison, like our vows were handcuffs. I felt like someone punched me in the chest. I asked her, "Are you saying you want to sleep with other people?" She didn't even hesitate. She said, "Yes." And then she smiled like she expected me to be proud of her honesty. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in our bedroom staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage. I kept asking myself, did she already cheat? Is this guilt? Is this her way of making cheating legal? And the worst part, she slept like a baby. Like she hadn't just shattered my world. The next morning she came into the kitchen cheerful as ever, poured coffee and said, "So, what do you think?" What do I think? I think my wife just asked permission to destroy me. But I didn't say that because I was weak. I was scared. I was terrified of losing her, so instead I asked, "Why do you want this?" And she shrugged, like she was choosing a new phone plan. Then she said, "Because I can love you and still want other people." That sentence became the theme of my suffering. After days of arguing, crying, and sleepless nights, I finally agreed. Not because I wanted to, but because she made it feel like the alternative was divorce. She said, "If you can't handle it, then maybe we're not meant to be." And I panicked. So we made rules that were supposed to protect our marriage. No friends or coworkers, always use protection, no emotional relationships, always be honest, no bringing anyone into our house. Melissa smiled and said, "See, this can work." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I wasn't losing my wife. But I just didn't know it yet, because within 2 weeks she broke the first rule. One night she came home glowing, like she had just come back from a vacation. She kissed my cheek and said, "Guess what? I met someone." My stomach dropped. I asked, "Who?" She said, "Oh, just a guy from work." I froze. I reminded her about the rules. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Ryan, you're being dramatic. He's not even my direct coworker." Then she said, "You said you wanted honesty, so here it is." Honesty, that's what she called it. Meanwhile, I felt like my heart was being ripped open. That night she went to shower, and I sat on the couch staring at the wall, because suddenly I realized this wasn't exploring. This was her upgrading, and I was just the guy at home paying the mortgage. Over the next year, Melissa turned our open marriage into her personal playground. She would come home late, sometimes not come home at all, and she would act like I had no right to be upset. If I looked sad, she'd say, "You agreed to this." If I asked questions, she'd say, "You're being insecure." If I tried to set boundaries, she'd say, "You're controlling." And the worst part, she started talking about her hookups like they were funny stories. Like I was her girlfriend, not her husband. She'd casually say things like, "Oh my God, you should have seen his apartment. He was so obsessed with me. I swear men are so easy." And I would just sit there, smiling like an idiot while my insides collapsed. Because I thought if I complained, she'd leave me. I was basically training her to disrespect me, and she loved it. One night, I finally snapped. Melissa came home at 3 a.m. again. She smelled like alcohol and perfume that wasn't hers. She stumbled into the kitchen, laughing at something on her phone. I asked her, "Do you even care how this makes me feel?" She looked at me like I was embarrassing. Then she said, "Ryan, you're not a victim. Stop acting like one." I said, "You're my wife." She shrugged and said, "And you're my husband, so act like one." Then she walked away like I was nothing. That night, something in me died. Because I realized she didn't respect me. She didn't love me the way I loved her. She loved the comfort I provided. And she loved the freedom she stole. I didn't confront her again. Not right away. Instead, I got quiet. I stopped asking questions, stopped waiting up, stopped trying to win her back. Melissa noticed. And at first, she liked it, because silence meant she could do whatever she wanted. But what she didn't realize was that silence wasn't surrender. Silence was me waking up. I started focusing on myself. I joined a gym, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to feel alive. I started reading books about self-respect. Therapy videos, podcasts. I started hanging out with my friends again. I started rebuilding my confidence. And slowly, I started seeing Melissa for who she really was, not my soulmate, not my best friend, just a selfish woman who wanted everything without consequences. About 2 years into this nightmare, I met someone at the gym. Her name was Sophie. She wasn't loud like Melissa. She wasn't flashy. But she had this calm energy that felt safe. We started talking casually, just gym talk at first. Then small jokes, then longer conversations. One day she asked, "Want to grab coffee after?" And I said yes. And that coffee turned into 2 hours, 2 hours of laughing, 2 hours of feeling seen, and the strangest part. She wasn't trying to impress me. She was just real. When I got home that night, Melissa wasn't there. And for the first time, I didn't care. Sophie and I kept talking. Weeks turned into months. And I didn't even realize how much I needed her presence. She would ask about my day, actually listen, actually care. If I talked about something stressful, she didn't roll her eyes. She didn't mock me. She didn't call me insecure. She said things like, "That sounds heavy. Are you okay?" No one had asked me that in years. One night I told her the truth, that I was technically still married, and that my wife had pushed for an open marriage. Sophie didn't judge me. She just looked at me quietly and said, "That sounds painful." And I swear, hearing someone acknowledge my pain made me want to cry right there. Eventually, Melissa started noticing that I wasn't sitting around waiting anymore. She'd come home and see me dressed nicely, or smiling at my phone, or leaving the house without telling her details. And she started getting weird. She'd ask, "Where are you going?" And I'd say calmly, "Out," and she'd narrow her eyes like she didn't like that answer. One night she said, "You're acting different." I shrugged and said, "Am I?" She laughed nervously and said, "Don't start playing games, Ryan." That was ironic, because she'd been playing games for years. But now that I wasn't her predictable little husband anymore, she started panicking. The turning point happened on a Saturday. Melissa came home early for once, and I was in the kitchen cooking. I was in a good mood. I had just come back from spending the day with Sophie. We didn't do anything crazy. We just went hiking, then had lunch, then sat in the car talking for hours. It felt peaceful. Melissa walked in and said, "Why are you smiling like that?" I said, "Just having a good day." She stared at me and said, "Are you seeing someone?" I paused, and then I said, "Yes." Her face changed instantly, like her ego got slapped. She said, "Who?" I said, "Someone who treats me like a human being." That's when she lost it. She started yelling, "So now you're trying to replace me?" I said, "You replaced me years ago." She screamed. "This is different." I laughed, actually laughed, and I said, "How is it different, Melissa?" She said, "Because I'm your wife." And I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Then why haven't you acted like it?" Silence. For the first time in years, she had no comeback. A week later, Melissa tried to change tactics. She started being sweet, cooking dinner, wearing lingerie, trying to act like the old days, but it felt fake, like a salesman trying to win back a customer. She hugged me and whispered, "I miss you." I didn't respond. Then she said, "We should close the marriage." That sentence almost made me choke. I said, "You mean you want to close it?" She frowned. I said, "You didn't care when it was hurting me." Melissa snapped. "Because you weren't doing anything, you were just sitting here miserable." That's when I realized she enjoyed me being miserable, because my misery made her feel powerful. But now that I was happy, now it was a problem. A few days later, I came home earlier than usual. Melissa didn't know, and I walked into the bedroom and saw her laptop open. A message popped up, and I swear my blood ran cold. It was from a man named Jason. And the message said, "Can't believe he still doesn't know about the first time you played him perfectly." I stared at the screen, hands shaking, and then I scrolled, because yes, I did it. I invaded her privacy. But at that point, she had invaded my soul for 10 years, and what I found made me feel physically sick. Melissa wasn't just sleeping around. She had been cheating before the open marriage, for at least a year, maybe more. The open marriage wasn't her idea of freedom. It was her cover-up plan, her guilt-free escape hatch. She didn't want honesty, she wanted permission. And I was stupid enough to sign the contract. That night, I didn't confront her. Not immediately. I sat on the couch calm, quiet, like I was watching a movie. Melissa came home later, humming like always. She walked in and said, "Hey, babe." I didn't respond. She frowned. "Ryan," I stood up and said. "I know." Her face tightened. "What?" I said. "I know you cheated before the open marriage." She froze, and then she did what narcissists always do. She laughed like it was ridiculous. Then she said, "Why are you snooping?" "That's insane." I stepped closer and said, "You don't even deny it." Melissa rolled her eyes and said, "So what if I did? We're open now." That sentence, that one sentence, was the final nail in the coffin, because she wasn't sorry. She never was, she just didn't want consequences, so I nodded slowly and said, "Okay." Then I walked into the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing. Melissa followed me yelling, "What are you doing?" I said calmly, "I'm leaving." She blinked like she didn't understand English. She said, "You can't just leave." I said, "Watch me." The next hour was chaos. Melissa cried, then yelled, then begged, then blamed me. She said, "You're throwing away 10 years. I said, "No, Melissa, you threw it away. I just finally stopped picking up the pieces." She said, "I'll change." I said, "You had 10 years to change." She grabbed my arm and said, "You're really leaving me for some gym girl?" That made me laugh again because she didn't even understand. I wasn't leaving for Sophie. I was leaving for myself. Sophie just reminded me what respect felt like. I pulled my arm away and said, "I'm leaving because I don't recognize myself anymore." Melissa cried, "Ryan, please, please don't do this." And for 1 second, I almost felt bad. But then I remembered every night I stayed awake while she was out. Every time she called me insecure. Every time she came home smelling like someone else. And I hardened my heart. Because she had taught me how, I walked out. And I didn't look back. For the first few weeks after I left, Melissa acted like I was bluffing. She sent casual texts like, "Okay, cool, you'll come back." Then she realized I wasn't, so she started calling nonstop. Then crying voicemails. Then angry threats. Then fake apologies, but I didn't answer. I moved into an apartment temporarily, filed for divorce, and told my lawyer everything. And here's the best part. Melissa thought she could ruin me financially. She thought she could take the house, take my savings, take everything, but she forgot one thing. I worked in IT. I handled our finances, and I had receipts, every hotel payment, every suspicious charge, every expensive dinner she claimed was work. I documented everything. And when my lawyer presented it, Melissa's confidence disappeared instantly. Because in our state, cheating still mattered in divorce settlements. And I had proof she cheated before the open marriage agreement, meaning she wasn't exploring. She was committing adultery. The judge didn't care about her excuses. The judge cared about evidence, and I had plenty. Melissa lost the house. She lost the savings she thought she could steal. She got stuck with debt she didn't even know I had traced back to her spending. And suddenly, her freedom got very expensive. But karma wasn't done with her. Because after the divorce process started, all those men she used to brag about, they vanished. Jason blocked her. Another guy she was seeing got engaged to someone else. And the funniest part, she tried to crawl back to me. She sent a long message saying, "I realize now you were the best thing in my life. I made a mistake. I miss us." I stared at it for a long time, and then I replied with one sentence. "I wasn't the best thing in your life. I was just the safest." Then I blocked her. A year later, my life looked completely different. I was healthier, happier. My career improved because I wasn't mentally destroyed every day. And Sophie and I took things slow, no rushing. No drama, no games, just peace. And the craziest part, for the first time in years, I felt safe in my own life. One night, Sophie asked me, "Do you regret it, staying so long?" I thought about Melissa, about the humiliation, about the pain, and I said, "I regret staying, but I don't regret leaving." Because leaving didn't just save my marriage, leaving saved my self-respect. So yeah, my wife wanted an open marriage. She wanted freedom. She wanted attention. She wanted endless options, and she got it. But what she didn't expect was that one day I would stop being her option. And when that happened, she finally learned the one thing she never wanted to accept. You can't treat someone like a backup plan and expect them to stay loyal forever. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Banter Storytime, because karma always collects its debt.